What is it? The New Testament makes it clear what it is. The New Testament tells us that the Antichrist in the middle of the week will go into the holy place in the temple and set up an idol of himself and demand that the entire world worship him. That is an abomination to God. An abomination to God. Scripture talks about this very specifically, and I'll refer to that in a moment. But there's another component, and I'm going to try to hurry and give this to you. We're looking eschatologically at the future, at the end time. The Antichrist makes a pact, breaks it in the middle, breaks it by setting up an idol of himself in the middle of the holy place in Jerusalem, trying to create a world religion, calls the whole world to worship him. Obviously, this is Satan worship at its pinnacle in its final form. All the nations of the world are encamped around. Jerusalem is the focal point of everything, and this idol is set up in the holy place. Is there anything like that in human history? Is there anything that you could look at? It would be a preview of that kind of behavior. Yes, there is. In the same prophecy of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 11, you have to study it on your own. Throughout chapter 11, you have the history of a particular ruler, a ruler that has been well known to students of history and Scripture as Antiochus. Antiochus, one of the major Seleucid kings, that is, he came from Syria. The powerful kings in Daniel 11 are the king of the south, the Ptolemies from Egypt, and the king of the north, the Seleucids from Syria that bordered Israel. In Daniel chapter 11, the Seleucid king is called a vile person, to whom they will not give the honor of royalty, but he shall come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue. This is referring to Antiochus IV, who was a Seleucid. Now, you need to know just a little bit about this particular guy, and I can't take you into a whole lot of detail. He came in the 3rd century. Daniel prophesies in the 6th century. He says there's going to be a king, and he gives all kinds of details about him, and he comes 3 centuries later. He offers himself as the protector of Israel. He's from Syria in the north. He will protect Israel from the south. He will protect Israel from the Egyptians, the Ptolemies in Egypt. That's going to be his commitment. He pretends to be the defender of Jerusalem. So he goes to war. This is what Daniel said he would do, and history said it's exactly what he did. Daniel said he would go to war against Egypt. He would then plunder Egypt, take all the spoils of Egypt, and buy influence in Israel. That's why in Daniel 11:24 says he shall enter peaceably even into the richest places of the province. He shall do what his fathers have not done, nor his forefathers, disperse among them plunder, spoil, and riches, devise his plans against the strongholds, but only for a time. So what he comes to do is bribe them, buys his way in as the protector of Israel by giving them some of the plunder he stole when he conquered Egypt. He goes back. He is to go back and make a final devastation of Egypt. That was Antiochus' plan. In the year 168, history says he was going to Egypt to make a final plunder of Egypt. He had already defeated Egypt. He had already made his alliance with Israel. It came to pass 3 centuries after Daniel said it would, exactly as he said it would. On his way to Egypt, he receives orders from Rome via Cyprus, because the Roman fleet was stationed at Cyprus. That's very important. The Roman fleet is anchored at Cyprus. The word comes to him. Caesar says, do not make war against the Ptolemies. Do not make war against Egypt. He is humiliated. He is angry. He is infuriated. So he withdraws from Egypt and he heads back to Syria. He is so mad that he decides to vent his rage. He's so mad he needs to kill somebody. So in passing, he decides to kill the Jews. As he goes north, he stops at Jerusalem. This is what Daniel said. Daniel 11:30, ships from Cyprus shall come against him. Therefore he shall be angry, return in rage against the holy covenant, and do damage. The word came from Cyprus to him by ship, not to go to Egypt, but to go back to Syria. And Daniel knew that 3 centuries before it happened because God revealed it to him. He stops and he's going to sack Jerusalem. He waits until the Sabbath, when he knows the people will be most vulnerable, orders an army of 250,000 soldiers to slaughter the Jews. Now remember, he's been their protector and their benefactor. He met with very little resistance. He then took control, set Jewish apostates, defectors from Judaism, enemies of Israel's covenant with Jehovah. He set them in all the positions of power in the city. Daniel said he would do that. Daniel 11:30, he shall return and show regard for those who forsake the holy covenant. Daniel said he would put apostates in places of power. He did. He was trying to set up a thoroughly new religion of paganism. He demanded no more sacrifices be made to God. He demanded that all sacrifices be made to idols. The Sabbath was to be profaned. All laws of Judaism, both biblical and traditional, were to be eliminated. He wanted one people, one religion, just like Daniel said he would. And he was to be the object of everyone's worship. He called himself Epiphanes the Great One. The people called him Epimanes the Madman. And at that time, when he took power there, this is what he did. It says in the history of the Maccabees, the 15th day of the month Kislev, 145th year, he set up the abomination of desolation on the altar. You know what he did? We know. History says. He went into the holy place where the Jewish altar of sacrifice was, where God was being worshiped, and he put an image of Zeus on top of the altar where offerings were made to Jehovah. And he did exactly that. He abominated the holy place, and that brought desolation. Daniel 11:31, it says, there he committed the abomination of desolation. So you have a wonderful picture in Daniel. You have an illustration of someone in the 3rd century, or actually 168. You have an illustration of this individual just 2 centuries before the Lord, who abominates the holy place and is a picture of the future abomination of desolation at the end time. It is Daniel 11, by the way, that refers to Antiochus. But the other abomination of desolation in 927 can't refer to Antiochus because it refers to the very end of all history in the final 7 years before the Lord establishes his kingdom. There's a further reference to it in Daniel chapter 12 as well, which is looking at the end time abomination of desolation. So in a pattern that is pretty frequent in prophetic literature, you have a future prophecy illustrated in a near prophecy. Antiochus becomes an illustration of what the final Antichrist will do.